Hey, this is Dr. Ben Weitz, host of the Rational Wellness Podcast. I talk to the leading health and nutrition experts and researchers in the field to bring you the latest in cutting-edge health information. Subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast for weekly updates. And to learn more, check out my website, drweitz.com. Thanks for joining me, and let's jump into the podcast. Hello, Rational Wellness Podcasters. Today we'll be interviewing Brooke Hazen on treating erectile dysfunction in men. We'll be speaking with Brooke Hazen, who's an organic farmer, a fitness expert, and the author of the new book, You Are Not Broken, a holistic guide for men and women to heal the pathways of sexual dysfunction and restore relational harmony together. Brooke will be talking about how his addiction to porn led to erectile dysfunction and how, after failing the Western medical approach to erectile dysfunction, he incorporated a natural approach combining diet, exercise, IV, and oral nutritional supplements to restore his sexual health. Brooke, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I don't know where you want to start, but why don't you tell me a bit about your story and how you got involved with this situation?
Sure. The situation started about 4 years ago when I started noticing the symptoms of erectile dysfunction. And I, as you said, reached out to Western medicine for answers, but in the end, I discovered there were no answers for me in that form of healing modality. So I basically put all my faith in God to provide a full miracle healing for me. And the direction God led me was towards healing my neurology first, through the avenues of discovering that I had a porn addiction and learning about how all that works, as well as it became the beginning of an incredible journey for myself that launched me into all aspects of holistic health, which is, not only the sexual health, but I discovered that it's completely integral and cannot be separated from overall physical health and also relational health. And of course, for me, I have a very spiritual lifestyle, so I can't take God out of the picture either, because I believe that God is the ultimate healer behind natural holistic healing. It's the inherent intelligence and light that is in all our cells of our body that knows what to do best if we can simply provide those building blocks and healing modalities that it needs to restore itself to perfect balance.
And for me, that's Dr. Jeffrey Bland. No, I'm kidding. Sorry.
I didn't know who's Dr. Jeffrey Bland.
Oh, he's the father of functional medicine.
Okay.
He's one of the godfathers.
Gotcha. Okay.
So obviously you're haven't spent a lot of time talking to functional medicine audiences. On the porn addiction thing, what percentage of the population in the United States of men do you think are, what exactly does it mean to be addicted to porn? I mean, a guy who looks at porn and masturbates once in a while? Is it somebody who does it all the time? What is being addicted to porn mean exactly?
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's where I like to start, because this is the focus, the start of all the healing that we're looking to make. It's estimated about 80% of men watch pornography at least weekly. And it's usually an escalating type of addiction. So to say once a week is probably a lot more than that. 26% of women is estimated over once per week. And it really is an addiction because it's important to understand how pornographic addiction.
How does it break down to age? Is it more younger, more middle-aged?
Yeah. So this is the interesting thing, is that the fastest growing segment of ED is now young people, young men. And Western medicine has no idea what to do with this. And the reason is because Western medicine, I'll get into this more, doesn't tackle the issue of neurology, neurologically based erectile dysfunction at all, because basically the only prescription they have for any form of ED is pharmaceutical EDs that target organic ED, which is the endothelial function, the nitric oxide production pathways.
Right.
So going back to what causes this to be an addiction, it definitely is an addiction because we have no qualms about calling cocaine and morphine an addiction. Well, the brain cannot differentiate between a chemical addiction to cocaine, morphine, alcohol, and a neurological addiction. The brain cannot differentiate between the two at all. So it's important to understand what happens when you're watching pornography, as well as what happens when you ejaculate to pornography, because combined, it makes it a super stimulus addiction. But when a man ejaculates, dopamine crashes and prolactin rises, and an intense refractory period starts for lasts up to 2 weeks. It weaves up and down. And when there's overlapping ejaculation, we get perpetual mood imbalance, fatigue, and distancing in relationships. And this is the body shutting down and saying, I need to refocus all my energy on replenishing the precious lost nutrients from all the parts of my body to replace the vital sperm. Because that, for the body, focusing on replacing that incredible cocktail of life that creates new life is the sole goal, procreation. And it takes an immense toll on men. So when you combine that with the super stimulus of watching pornography, there's a novelty to every pornographic video that is perfect for men's mating brain, which we won't go into too much because it takes a whole podcast to talk about mating versus bonding behaviors. But yes, this novelty creates an addiction for men. And when they combine it with the release of semen, it creates an incredible cycle of addiction that's deepening and continues to escalate. So every time a man continues to ejaculate to a new form of pornography, the dopamine receptors and levels drop. They continue to drop because the brain essentially cancels out its receptors, dopamine receptors and levels, because it's just too much for the brain to be able to handle. And so you see decreasing levels of dopamine, and it takes ever increasing escalating material to get the same dopamine kick each time that you watch pornography. So this really is an addiction completely. It's just that Western culture has not yet called it an addiction on a large scale. We continue to promote it, and unknowingly and unwittingly, our entire population is seeing the results of a 2-decade-long experiment that's been taking place. And now we're seeing the results where an entire generation of young men are unable to have the first sexual experience of their lives and have any sort of meaningful connection in relationships.
Okay, so let's get into what to do about it. Obviously, you stop watching porn.
Yeah, well, I did. Yes, I have. I've not watched pornography for about 3 or 4 years now, and I'm blessed. It's a very easy solution for recovering our dopamine levels. It's refraining from pornography, and then regaining our chi sexual energy, which is our energetic, sexual energy, as well as our overall physical energy, can be done simply by refraining from ejaculation. So those two combined are free. It's a very simple solution. Yeah. It's just that it's extremely difficult for men that are addicted to pornography to, let alone understand these concepts, embrace it, but also to enact it, to continue to refrain from pornography and ejaculation because they are so addicted to it.
I guess that second part of the message is something that really doesn't resonate with me. Personally, I've always found it more stressful not to ejaculate for weeks at a time than
Yes. That is the sort of dichotomy of it, or the what do you call it? Contradiction of it. Actually, so many things that seem contradictory actually are beneficial for us, with diet, whether that's our sexual habits, with medicine. By not ejaculating, we increase our sexual energy and our ability to to have a powerful sex life. We also balance out our relationship with our partners better, and we increase sensitivity. We actually can heal our sexual ED physically from refraining from ejaculation. Because again, I've identified 3 forms of ED. I've identified the first form, which is neurologically based ED, which I think is not only the most important base that we should be looking at when we look at ED, but also has the most transformative
so
parts
when
of
you
it.
talk about neurologically, normally, I'm a chiropractor. I would think if you said neurological based erectile dysfunction, that there's some compression of the nerves coming out of your back or your spinal cord that would be creating this problem.
Exactly. Yeah. Not to be confused with like neurodegenerative disease or nerves. I mean, basically we're talking about the neurochemistry and the hormones. So we're talking about the important thing to understand is when we engage in sex, a lot of it really is neurological. It really starts with the healthy neurology, healthy levels of dopamine levels and receptor sites. And not only sexually, but in all areas of life, if we want to have a profound physical transformation and relational transformation in life, we also need to have this healthy neurology. Our neurology is the most important foundation for transformation in our life. It actually can unleash the power of our mind. And
but
once we unleash,
isn't there key as far as neurology on the level you're talking about is getting yourself into that parasympathetic mode, because we're all in this sympathetic, stress mode all the time?
Yeah, not so much talking about that. I don't really get into that too much in my book. I know I've heard a lot about that in the talk about sexuality. Yes, when we do engage in sex, we get in the parasympathetic mode naturally.
And so many people today have so much trouble because we're in that, stress mode all the time.
Yes, but I don't think that's so much of an issue. I think we put way too much emphasis on certain things that are myths. Like we focus too much on organic ED when we should first be looking at our dopamine levels and receptors. We need to first cleanse ourselves of the addiction to pornography, as well as watch our ejaculation amounts, because every time we ejaculate, we're essentially depleting chi sexual energy sexually, as well as in all aspects of our lives. Eastern traditions have recognized this for millennia. Western culture regularly practices these mating behaviors of primarily focusing on ejaculation with the focus of climax. And this is incredibly depleting to our sexual chi energy. So the second form of ED I've identified is energetic ED. It's that depletion of chi sexual energy. And lastly, the third one is organic ED. That's the one that we always talk about because, again, Western medicine only focuses on organic ED, and they're actually misprescribing and misdiagnosing for the majority of ED cases because they do not have a medicine that deals with neurological ED because it doesn't make them any money, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably, I'm sure there's more than one form of organic ED, right? There's vascular issues. There's issues with men who have who have scar tissue, who have that Crohn's disease. There's a number of different issues. But anyway, let's get into the second part of your book. And I know chapter 7 is the one where you start talking about hormones. So what do you think about using testosterone as part of an effective treatment for erectile dysfunction?
So now we're going to get into the second part of my book is about organic ED. So this is, this can also, even if you don't have organic ED, this can actually increase your performance sexually. So as far as identifying ED traditionally or in mainstream Western medicine organically, we look at hormones, we look at, which is our testosterone levels versus estrogen levels. And then we look at vascular ED, which is what the mainstream Western pharmaceutical industries target. It's the endothelial system, the nitric oxide production pathway of our blood vessels. And then there can also be impacts to the the Alcock's canal and the pelvic region that can cause ED. And that can be tested through a venous leak and MRIs. And then we also have, actually, to complicate things more, neurodegenerative type of ED. And we could also have surgeries from like prostate. So those are the sources of organic ED. Now, starting with what you want to start into on chapter 7, I'm a big fan of bioidentical pellet testosterone replacement therapy. That's a long word. And basically, it's a completely natural form of testosterone for men and also for women. Women, actually, there's, in my book, I cite studies that are incredibly beneficial to women. But
I've really been enjoying this discussion, but I'd like to take a minute to tell you about a new product that I'm very excited about. I'd like to tell you about a new wearable called the Apollo. And this is a device that can be worn on the wrist or the ankle, and it uses vibrations to stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system. And this device has amazing benefits in terms of getting you out of that stressed out sympathetic nervous system and stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system. It has a number of different functions, especially helping you to relax, to focus, to concentrate, to get into a deeper meditative state, even to help you sleep. And there's even a mode to help you wake up. And this all occurs through the scientific use of subtle vibrations. For those of you who might be interested in getting the Apollo for yourself to help you reset your nervous system, go to apolloneuro.com and use the affiliate code Weitz10. That's my last name, WEITZ 10. And now back to the discussion. Now, when you say bioidentical, aren't all men who are taking testosterone using bioidentical? I'm not aware of, testosterone coming from horses or something like that.
I believe there is some synthetic sources of testosterone.
Okay.
But the bioidentical testosterone replacement therapy is from natural plant sources generally, or it's from a natural source. It's not. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if you know more about whether there are synthetic forms.
Well, I mean, in women's hormones, that's a big thing because it's common for many years for the most commonly prescribed form of estrogen to come from horses' urine, Premarin, and synthetic progesterone, progestins. And so bioidenticals are big. But when it comes to testosterone, my understanding is that all the testosterone is the same.
Well, that's a good point. As far as women, I know for sure there's synthetic estrogen, and that's where the cancer studies have come from.
Right.
That's based on that
Health Initiative of 2001.
As far as men, honestly, I don't know if there's but what I can say is that the bioidentical form, pellet form, it's a much more sustained form. So rather than injecting or using creams or patches daily or every other day or every few days, you're getting a consistent dose that mimics, that's why they call it bioidentical. It mimics the natural cycles of your body as closely as we can get.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, what age should men consider using testosterone? Because I've talked to men in their 20s and 30s who are taking testosterone, and that can have some serious side effects, especially if they want to, have families.
I think it's so dependent on how we've been treating our body and our diet and where we're at as far as our estrogen and testosterone levels. It's impossible really to gather our testosterone levels when you're in our 20s to gauge what our optimal testosterone levels are. So usually what I recommend is to look at the negative symptoms of lack of sufficient testosterone. So it'd be like, you're experiencing fatigue and loss of sexual drive, just a loss of general drive and mood imbalances and, those sort of issues. And then, go from there. But, you can also scale it up or scale it down. Even with the pellets, usually they'll start a little lower and they'll build up. And that's the way I recommend everything in my book, is to start low and go slow and build up. Don't overdo anything to start, so you can see how your body reacts. But yeah, I would say the age-wise, generally speaking, I think we're looking at men once they start to hit their 40s are starting to get declining testosterone levels. And it continues to decline as we get into our 50s and 60s. I found enormous benefits with it's really another biohack that is the linchpin for transformation with our physical growth, as far as our physical health and weight training. Something that goes hand in hand with BPTRT or with testosterone therapy in general is blood donation. And that's because when you take pellet TRT, you're actually increasing your red blood cell count, and you don't want that to get too high. So a really great thing that I recommend for people, even if they're not taking pellet testosterone therapy, is to regularly donate blood. And the reason is because as time goes on, we don't really change the oil in our car, so to speak. We get increasing levels of iron levels as well as oxidation in our blood. And so whenever we donate blood, actually even one donation per year decreases the chance of heart attack by 88%. So this is actually a healing modality in and of itself for people that are at risk of cardiovascular disease and heart attacks. And we should really be recommending this to everyone. But what it does is it actually increases your antioxidant capacity and reduces the iron stores. And those are high iron stores are linked with all kinds of diseases like heart disease, as well as neurodegenerative diseases too.
Yeah, it's the case that men who take testosterone from any source, whether it be pellets or otherwise, need to have a doctor who's monitoring their hematocrit levels, which is indication of the thickness of their blood due to increased red blood cell production. And if that gets above a certain level, then for sure, donating blood makes a lot of sense. And it depends on the guy. It depends on the dosage. And then, of course, you also want to make sure that you're not seeing an increase in estrogen levels, because testosterone can aromatize into estrogen. And so that can also create side effects. And
I want to add too that blood flow is so important for sexual function as well as our overall physical health. They go hand in hand. But donating blood reduces blood pressure and viscosity. So that's another benefit that it does.
The other thing you got to look at is free testosterone versus total testosterone, because the free testosterone is what's really available to do the job. And there are men who have decent total testosterone levels, but their free testosterone is too low because their binding globulins, their sex hormone binding globulin is elevated, and that binds too much of the free testosterone. So that can be another whole issue.
Your clinic will monitor all these things, not to get afraid, but basically it is important to always be aware of what is going on in your body. What are your estrogen levels? And you can take, they'll prescribe anastrozole to lower estrogen. I take that a couple times a week, just a little pill. And also they'll recommend HCG to maintain fertility and testicular size. This actually is a secondary source of testosterone and can actually has the added bonus of increasing the size of your testicles and lingam, especially in conjunction with some of the other healing modalities like Kegels, refraining from too much ejaculation, and PRP and stem cells.
Okay. So the next thing you have in your book is exercise for erectile dysfunction. Perhaps you can tell us what you think is potentially effective in that regard.
Okay. Well, again, this is working on our overall physical health so that we can have a great blood flow to our sexual areas, working on our cardiovascular system. Because I'm not a fan of fat. I think that I used to have
fat.
Yeah, I mean,
members of the fat club.
Yeah, nobody is. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I like to focus a lot on getting rid of fat. I used to be 30 pounds overweight, but I really put all my determination into getting rid of the fat, because not only do we have surface fat, but we have visceral fat. And the visceral fat is the one that's the most dangerous. It wraps around our organs and is linked with so many different diseases and precursors to cancers and all kinds of bad stuff. So we really want to get to this visceral fat, and we can best do that by getting rid of our surface fat, and then through intermittent fasting and with a plant-based diet that's not high in any processed foods, we can start burning off this visceral fat. But going back to the muscle, the workout, the weights, the exercise helps us to burn fat and gain lean muscle mass. Because I really feel like we need to be having a solid pathway of flow, of blood flow, as well as just chi, sexual energy from our chest to our lingam. As we age, we actually sort of get atrophy in these areas as men. We get, breasts, we get, we get a belly fat, and we even get fat in the mons pubis area, which is the padding above our lingam. So what I'm focused on doing is encouraging all of us to do everything we can to restore the muscular aspects all the way from our chest to our lingam. And this even includes the area around our lingam through doing Kegel exercises. So I'm big on sit-ups, I'm big on weight training, and I'm also big on doing the Kegels. I do the Kegels twice a day. So in my book, there's some studies that have shown that Kegel exercises is a monotherapy alone for increasing or getting rid of organic erectile dysfunction. It's been highly effective with that. So this builds up the muscles around our lingam. It brings more energy to our lingam, and has been shown to help reduce erectile dysfunction.
And of course, heavy weight training has been shown to raise testosterone and growth hormone levels.
Yeah, it's a cyclical thing. That's what I was getting at. And it also is cyclical with fat and muscle building. So it's been shown that weight training actually can create a positive cycle of burning fat and building more muscle. So we want to get into positive cycles.
And of course, having more fat tends to lead to more estrogen.
Yes. It's completely interwoven. That's why holistic healthcare is really the only way that I see getting to any curative and preventative form of medicine.
So let's go into what's the best nutritional diet approach for erectile dysfunction?
Okay, well, basically a animal-based diet has been shown to have short-term and long-term negative effects on erectile function. And this is because the saturated fat, the carcinogens, and the free radicals, they create problems in our endothelial function, which then in turn suppresses our nitric oxide production. So what my goal is overall with all these healing modalities is to get to the root cause of what we're targeting through the pharmaceutical EDs by boosting nitric oxide, but to do this where our body can do it on its own without being dependent on taking a pill each time you want to gain this nitric oxide production. So what I looked at is plant-based diet has all the same protein levels and amino acid building blocks as an animal-based diet, but it has phytoestrogens and phytonutrients, which actually get rid of free radicals. They target and eliminate the free radicals, and thereby, eliminate the source of. I want to talk about, first of all, I have to back up and say the source of organic ED through blood flow issues is arteriosclerosis. And so I want to look at what is causing arteriosclerosis. The cause of arteriosclerosis is actually, it's basically heavy metals, I've discovered, an animal-based diet, as well as if you smoke, and environmental pollutants. Those are the sources of primarily that cause arteriosclerosis. In fact, the recent studies have been showing that arteriosclerosis is not just a fat blocking disease, it's actually an inflammatory disease also. And this is the inflammation that happens from the free radicals that are in our blood vessels. And what happens is the body's only mode of protection, other than the healing modalities that we're looking at doing in my book, is to create cholesterol. So LDL cholesterol is actually an antioxidant, antiviral, anti-carcinogen. It's like the ambulance driver. It goes to the site of free radical oxidation and it deactivates the toxins, it deactivates the free radicals, and then it goes back to the liver in the form of HDL. So we're completely misunderstanding in our reductive medical approach that LDL cholesterol and HDL cholesterol are really both good. It's just that we're not getting to the root problem, which is the free radicals. So we need to tackle the free radicals, essentially, that is causing oxidation in our blood vessels. And through diet, through a plant-based diet that avoiding sugars, processed foods, like I don't eat a lot of refined grains or fried items, but I avoid any of these free radicals. So we do this by just whole foods, the way nature intended, through a lot of fruits and vegetables and nuts and whole grains like quinoa. And we can get it through superfoods. And these superfoods actually further decrease the free radicals in our body. So basically we have a diet approach and the supplements. And then also we'll get into chelation IVs. All these are looking at getting rid of any arteriosclerosis that's developing in our blood vessels. I actually did my own study where I had mild arteriosclerosis, mild calcification and plaque in both my aortic and carotid arteries. And I did a full course of chelation IV therapy with Plaque X. And before and after, I did an ultrasound and discovered that after my full course, I had zero arteriosclerosis or plaque buildup in my blood vessels. So we're able to get rid of this. There is no reason to be continually taking statins.
This is using a carotid artery ultrasound?
Yeah, I did $500 for the local cardiology testing center. They did ultrasound for both my carotid and aortic arteries and before and after. And I was able to show just from myself that a before and after where I had mild arteriosclerosis that was completely taken away from the before and after. Okay. So, and there's studies on this. I did my own study, but there is the TACT-1 study. That's the trial to assess chelation therapy study. This is a government study, right? that showed that there was a 51% reduction in cardiac events and 43% reduction in mortality in patients with diabetes. And this has spurred the TACT-2 study, which is ongoing. So we have solutions.
How many IV chelation sessions did you do?
Well, for that one, I do them regularly, but I do a maintenance now, but during that time I did it pretty much weekly. And, once a week, I'd alternate with Plaque X and with calcium EDTA. That's kind of the one I recommend is calcium EDTA.
What is Plaque X?
Plaque X is phosphatidylcholine, or PC for short, and it's basically made of soybean. And it makes up all the cell membranes of our cell walls. And what it does is it regenerates. It's a biohack. It regenerates our cells, our cell walls, so we can once again digest and release toxins from our cells that have built up and caused basically our cells to stop working on a large scale. The combination of Plaque X and calcium EDTA is phenomenal. It basically, through these TACT studies, there was also a study.
So the sodium EDTA binds to the cholesterol, and the phosphatidylcholine does the same thing, or what does it do?
No, actually, the PC, the phosphatidylcholine, or the Plaque X is the brand name. That actually creates a process where it backs out the cholesterol portion from our blood vessels, and it balances our healthy cholesterol levels. At the same time, the calcium EDTA or the disodium EDTA, they're actually, I've found in my research that they actually are very similar in action. It's just that the calcium EDTA is a little safer to use. Okay. It's not that disodium EDTA is not safe. It's just that it's safer. And so I kind of recommend the calcium EDTA, but basically the calcium EDTA, that chelates. It's a chelator. So it grabs onto the heavy metals and gets rid of the heavy metals. So again, going back to what causes arteriosclerosis, it's a combination of heavy metal, cholesterol, and calcification that causes this soup, this toxic soup that's in our blood vessels that suppresses, covers up our endothelial layer from being able to produce healthy levels of nitric oxide. That's the source of organic blood flow ED.
Okay. Now, you also talk about doing Myers cocktails with glutathione intravenous that you alternate with the chelation. Now,
yeah, well, the glutathione is usually used. You can use that in smaller doses through any IV therapy, whether you're doing, like I do right now, what I'm doing as a maintenance is a Myers cocktail, which for people that aren't aware, it's vitamin C and all the Bs, and it's got minerals, and I'm probably missing some things, but it's basically nutrient dense, and it boosts our immune system heavily. I noticed a great jump, and I highly recommend it for people that are getting sick normally. But I combine now the NAD in a lower, like a mid dose. So it's like a 250 milliliters rather than a 550 milliliters in the Myers cocktail, and then follow it with a little boost of glutathione. You should also use the glutathione with when you're doing the chelation and the plaque X. You don't have to do it all at once, but it's good to have the glutathione in there because the glutathione helps to process this through our organs and get the heavy metals out and help with like the cholesterol that's being pushed out. Glutathione is the mother of all antioxidants. And again, the antioxidants are what gets rid of the free radicals in our blood vessels. But while we're doing this, it's important to get rid of the source of free radicals. That's why I talk a lot about diet, because if the source of free radicals is heavy metals and diet, animal-based foods and other types of processed foods, or those sort of processed type products and sugars, then, we need to stop doing that while we are resolving these issues. So it's a combination. It's a 1-2 punch of let's start getting rid of this source of arteriosclerosis through our natural healing modalities like these chelations and other, but it's also foundational. It's getting rid of the source at the same time. So you don't just keep treading water and keep giving yourself more free radicals while you're getting rid of the free radicals.
And explain why you do the NAD as well. You mentioned
NAD. I know you're into biohacking, and so many of the things in my book are all about biohacking. My book is one big giant biohack. And so the NAD is a big biohack. That is actually incredible. It boosts energy levels. I've noticed a huge jump in my mental clarity and my physical energy levels. With NAD, it's a mitochondrial type IV. So this is targeting our mitochondria, which is the driving engine force of our cells. And it's regenerating it, and it's rebuilding our mitochondria on a cellular level. And basically just gives us incredible energy. It's also used sexually. It's used to help rebuild neurologically, rewire from low dopamine levels. So it's used with alcohol treatment centers for low levels of dopamine from alcohol addiction. Same thing for porn addiction. You have the same levels of dopamine crashes that you have in pornography addiction as you do with morphine, cocaine, and alcohol. These are all dopamine addictions. In fact, food can be a dopamine addiction too. So what I'm looking at doing is stripping ourselves of these negative habits and addictions and cultural myths and peer pressure that make us think we need to behave a certain way, and start all over with healthy decisions and a healthy neurology, focusing on having balanced dopamine levels and receptors, because that's going to create the drive and the drive and the willpower to make transformation in all areas of our lives. But first with sexually, but then you'll find it's really everything, because sexual health and physical health are completely inseparable. They go one and together. The lingam is is a protruding member of our cardiovascular, nervous, and hormonal system. It's all in full glory, showing us the current state of health or disease within those systems.
I'd like to interrupt this fascinating discussion we're having for another few minutes to tell you about another really exciting product that has changed my life and the life of my family, especially as it pertains to getting good quality sleep. It's something called the Chili Pad, CHILIPAD. It can be found at the website chilisleep.com, which is CHILISLEEP.com. And so this product involves a water-cooled mattress pad that goes underneath your sheets and helps you maintain a constant temperature at night. If you've ever gotten woken up because the temperature has changed, typically gets warmer, this product will maintain your body at a very even temperature, and it tends to promote uninterrupted quality deep and REM sleep, which is super important for healing and for overall health. And if you go to chilisleep.com and you use the affiliate code Weitz20, that's my last name, WEITZ 20, you'll get 20% off a Chili Pad. So check it out, and let's get back to this discussion. So you also mentioned in your book the use of shockwave therapy to the penis.
I love that one. I really feel like people have been seeing a lot of great studies and a lot of great experiential evidence that it's sort of a new thing with ED, but it's it's an ultrasound. It's called EPAT, or extracorporeal pulse activation technology. And this is an ultrasound that basically is what I've found through the sexual clinic I went to, and I like to share these little specifics on my podcast that I don't get into in my book, but we actually went further. Normally, these centers, sexual clinics, in fact, I bought my own EPAT machine. You don't have to go to a clinic, but normally what they do is they'll just do like a quick one on the sides of your lingam, and that's it. And it's like, like a minute or two. Well, what we're doing now is longer periods, last 20 minutes, where you're doing not only the sides of the lingam, but the top and the bottom, which they weren't doing before. But now studies are showing, we're showing that this is the way to do it, as well as the Kira, which are the sides and the mons pubis above, and importantly, the feeder to it all, which is the Alcock's canal. That's the major blood vessel between your anus and your lingam that feeds the lingam full of blood. So what it does is it breaks up the plaque buildup in the capillaries. So we have very fine capillaries in our lingam and in our sexual organ area, some of the smallest in the body.
And so what is the shockwave therapy technically doing? Is it increasing blood flow, breaking up adhesions? What exactly?
Well, it does a number of things. So again, synergistically, it will actually increase cellular growth of new blood vessels when you combine it with PRP or stem cell. But really what it's doing on its own is it's breaking up plaque, and it's also, even on its own, it's helping to grow new blood vessels. So it's doing both. And it's when you combine it with the chelation IV therapy and plaque X to help get rid of plaque buildup in the blood vessels, we can now resolve really any level of arteriosclerosis form of ED, both from the inside out through our blood vessels and the outside in through EPAT technology to the surface areas of our lingam and our surrounding sexual pelvic region.
So let's get into the section of your book where you talk about specific supplements that may be beneficial. And the first one you talk about is pycnogenol.
Yeah, there's a lot of studies on. I like pycnogenol. It's French maritime pine bark, and it's a really amazing antioxidant that operates from a lot of different pathways. It's not just a nitric oxide booster, but it actually works with lowering LDL and raising HDL, It helps with increasing nitric oxide. It blood flow. It helps with arteriosclerosis. I know I'm forgetting some things that are in my book, but basically it's an all-around supplement that. Now I want to say first to your listeners, you should know that supplements are usually not quite as effective as chelators. Chelators deliver 100% of the nutrients, building blocks to our blood vessels, to our cells. The supplements have to pass through our digestive tract, and much of it is lost in the digestive tract. Doesn't mean we shouldn't take supplements. I take supplements daily. It's just that during our healing process, when we're really revamping ourselves and transforming ourselves, we're going to want to do a lot of IVs to start if that's our goal. I believe it's our goal no matter what, because we want to have overall physical health. But pycnogenol is one, and I have a lot of different supplements that I recommend. A lot of them are, all of them are really antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. It's basically working on getting rid of the inflammation in our blood vessels, as well as the free radicals in our blood vessels.
So, one of the supplements you recommend, I think the second one I saw on your list was Ancestral Supplements Male Optimization Formula. I thought it was interesting that you selected that one because you're recommending not eating meat, and this is basically ground up testicles and penis or prostate and things like that.
It is interesting.
I would have thought you would have recommended, because there's a bunch of herbal supplements for libido, the horny goat weed, and there's a bunch of different.
I've tried those. All the supplements in my book I've tried, and the ones I don't recommend in my book is for a reason. There's a lot of herbs, as well as, there's a lot of arginine that's being promoted to use daily, but I've tried all that. I've tried daily arginine. And
what about typically arginine is used for nitric oxide. And I think most of the data seems to support L-citrulline better than arginine. And so, I think what a lot of people are using is L-citrulline, and possibly in combination with beetroot extract for nitric oxide production.
So this is where, for me, I wanted to make sure I recommend for the readers that they're not taking anything that's going to cause blood pressure drop. So we have to be really careful when we're experimenting with our with these type of plants and herbs and amino acids like arginine. I do recommend citrulline, and citrulline is in the triaminos, which I recommend as I take in my
part of your IV.
My Myers is, I forgot to mention, I take the triaminos in there. Triaminos is arginine, citrulline, and ornithine, and those are targeted more for the blood vessel function area of all of our body. It's not just our lingam, but that's where people don't understand. They think that these things are actually going straight to our lingam. They go through our whole body. Our whole body's connected. But going back to those certain herbs can, and like if you take arginine daily and you take beets daily, I've actually had a chronic drop in blood pressure. So we have to be really careful, especially with pharmaceutical EDs. I really think that a lot of this is very dangerous, how they're prescribing these powerful nitric oxide inducers for people that have ED that may not even be organic, but even if people do have organic ED, it's not resolving anything. And even daily use of arginine can cause a chronic drop in blood pressure, chronically low blood pressure drop. And I've had that happen where you can be fatigued for a couple days after taking some of these herbs and some of these aminos. So what I've done is I've taken that out of the picture. So I've already experimented with all these things like a mad scientist, and I've made it easy where your listeners can just take what I recommend in the book and call it quits. We're good with that. You don't need to mess around with a lot of herbs and these different. It's complicated.
You do recommend maca root.
Yeah, I love maca root. I love maca. And I'm not saying citrulline's not great. It's great. It's just that taking it every day is not necessary, especially if you're doing the triaminos IV as a maintenance. I don't recommend taking arginine or citrulline every day as a supplement and beets too. I've had trouble with beets where, again, I mean, you could be working out really hard and you could have a sudden drop in blood pressure. So we have to be really careful with this. But yeah, maca is another really great. The studies have shown it's highly effective. A lot of these are monotherapies that are effective as monotherapies for reducing erectile dysfunction. But when we use it all synergistically, we have a powerful effect where we don't have any side effects, but we're having increased sexual function as well as overall physical health.
And you like the black maca over other forms?
That's just one that is an organic black maca supplement. So some of these supplements, I mean, there's different brands like the MoFo, the male optimization formula, which has the cow organs, that we mentioned. There's another brand in Australia that produces that too. I just at the time I picked ones that were working well. But generally speaking, I would be really cautious about going outside of these, trying new things like I mentioned, the beets and certain herbs, these horny goatweeds. Like, for example, Lipidium? It's I forgot what it's like, a monkey something herb. It's like an herb that's being used in for MS, and it's reduces the symptoms of shaking. But they found that some of these clients were actually getting chronically horny with this and perverted to the point where and then they started finding that their neurological aspects were declining. They were actually starting to go crazy. So, you have to be really careful with some of these, trying some of these things that are being put out there in these bottles, because, they sell, this is a big industry. Again, natural herbal industry is a huge industry. So I'm really careful in my book to warn people and provide the supplements that really, we're talking about supplements where you get into trouble here, but we have to be really careful with the supplements. And So you recommend Age Lock Vitality and Age Lock Youth by Pharmanex? Yeah, well, those are adaptogens in the Age Lock Vitality. That has the cordyceps, it has the Asian ginseng. Asian ginseng has been used in traditional Chinese medicine for millennia as, for aging men for vitality, for basically not only, again, sexual health, but overall physical energy levels. Because again, it's all energy levels. Sex is just simply a symbiotic member of our overall energy levels. It's an indicator of our energy levels. So I think there's pomegranate in that vitality also. A lot of these supplements I have, again, they all do not create side effects. They're all benign. They focus on the source, which is the free radicals. Again, you could take herbal supplements just like you could take pharmaceutical ED meds and never get to the root solution, the root cause. My supplements actually get to the root cause of, in this case, we're talking about organic blood flow ED issues. Which is why you have arterial seal, which is something I use for a lot of patients with cardiovascular risk factors. Yeah. So I've found that like the seaweeds and the mushrooms are incredible. They're incredible. Again, we're getting to the root source of healing. We want to heal. I mean, Western medicine, with especially the approach to ED, is solely focused on symptoms. They never actually get to any long-term solution to anything, to ever recover a vibrant sexual function again naturally. They don't do that, or any recovery at all. It's always going to be dependent on their medicines. I'm empowering all of us to say, hey, we're more than a scarlet letter, and we're more than dependent on just this medicine. Let's take our power back, and let's not only revive and increase our sexual function to the highest levels we can imagine, but also our overall physical health. Let's just hit a couple more of these. You mentioned bee pollen and flower pollen. Yeah, those are both used historically. And again, these are natural. They don't have side effects. The pine pollen is helps all these. They work on blood flow. They work on cholesterol and inflammation, antioxidant, free radical damage. It's amazing what some of these natural products do. That are non-herbal, I think maca might be, it's kind of a food herb sort of thing, but I don't have a whole lot of herbs in my list of supplements.
A few more. You have curcumin, boswellia, resveratrol.
Yeah, curcumin, that's basically, we're talking about...
the active ingredient in turmeric.
Turmeric, yes. Thank you. Yeah, we're basically talking about turmeric, but curcumin is actually a much more readily available form of it. It's actually the polyphenol that's in the turmeric. So it's a little more effective than just taking turmeric.
Right. I like the Mariva form too. We use several different, the concept is that turmeric is not particularly well absorbed, so curcumin is more concentrated. And then to get it into the cells, there's several different strategies, specialized forms that increase the absorption. And this Mariva, which is curcumin blended with phosphatidylcholine, is one of those.
Exactly. Yeah, I was your last podcast. I know he specializes in a lot of techniques to make things more readily absorbable, and that is important.
Right. Good. Okay. Boy, you actually had quite a number of supplements. I see a few more. There's this one I never heard of, vineya, which contains 6 milligrams of Piceid, which is a precursor to resveratrol. That's something new for me.
So I kind of doubled up on that. I don't recommend doing that when we're already recommended doing the age lock. There was resveratrol as another supplement.
Right.
I tried the vineya and it was a little too strong for me when I was already using resveratrol. So I dialed that back and recommend just doing one or the other. So I do just the resveratrol, but the vineya is interesting with all the studies on it as far as a really good source of resveratrol. And resveratrol has been used in diabetes patients and has been highly effective with recovering sexual function with diabetes patients.
And a lot of these supplements are also beneficial for longevity. So resveratrol is a sirtuin stimulator. It also has activity for activating AMPK, which are some of the longevity pathways.
Yeah. There was another IV I didn't talk about, which is polymva, as well as the Myers is being used for cancer in high doses, high dose Myers. I actually do a mid dose. So once you go to a high dose of vitamin C in your Myers cocktail, it becomes oxidative, which is what fights cancer. But you can do a mid dose and still be addressing those issues. But it still stays as sort of more of an antioxidant. So you can play around with those levels of vitamin C. Polymva has also been used in cancer. It's being used recently, highly effective with good results, percentage rates of remission with cancer using polymva IV.
I guess I'll hit one more thing. You mentioned using greens, something called heart greens, as a way to stimulate nitric oxide instead of using the citrulline and
the beets. And the beets. Yeah, exactly. That again, I have toyed around with all these experientially and gone through the low blood pressure crashes and found that the beets and the daily arginine have caused low blood pressure crashes, whereas what was the one you just mentioned?
The heart greens.
Oh yeah, the heart greens I found was it actually is a more benign way of increasing nitric oxide. It basically is greens. It has a lot of leafy greens are shown to be very beneficial, not only as a supplement, but when you're eating for our nitric oxide production, for antioxidants. So it sort of works a couple different ways. It's antioxidant. It targets free radical damage, while it is also increasing some nitric oxide in a more benign way that doesn't cause blood pressure drops.
Cool. So I think that's pretty much a wrap. You want to leave us with any final thoughts? And I don't know if you want to have where your book is available.
Sure.
Get a hold of it.
Before I say where my book is, I just want to say that I really feel like the first and foremost diagnosis for ED should start with how often does a gentleman or a lady, a gentleman in this case, ejaculate to pornography? Because it's, again, the pornography addiction as well as the ejaculation that causes the drop in dopamine and chi sexual energy. I do believe that organic ED is largely overblown because that's the only way that mainstream Western medicine and institutions, pharmaceutical industries can resolve ED. So they naturally want to blow that up into something bigger than it really is. Doesn't mean that we can't benefit sexually from and physically with our overall health from these natural healing modalities. But the focus should be first having balanced dopamine levels and a healthy neurology. And then from there, we'll be able to more easily tackle our physical health that's going to greatly enhance our sexual health.
Cool. And then how can we find the book? Is it available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon and the other booksellers, or?
Okay, well, you can go to my website and I have a link there.
What's your website?
It's BrookeHazen.com. So my name is spelled BrookeHazen, BrookeHazen.com. And there's a link there for Amazon. Basically, I sell through Amazon. I have the paperback, I have the audio in my own voice, and I have a Kindle. I also am coming out with a Spanish and Chinese version in case anyone is interested in that. I'm trying to make it as readily available to people because I believe that these healing modalities can benefit all of us.
That's great, Brooke. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, too. A pleasure being on here.
Thank you for making it all the way through this episode of the Rational Wellness Podcast. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star ratings and review. That way, more people will be able to find this Rational Wellness Podcast when they're searching for health podcasts. And I wanted to let everybody know that I do now have a few openings for new nutritional consultations for patients at my Santa Monica Weitz Sports Chiropractic and Nutrition Clinic. So if you're interested, please call my office, 310-395-3111, and sign up for one of the few remaining slots for a comprehensive nutritional consultation with Dr. Ben Weitz. Thank you, and see you next week.